Hey fam, in this video I am going to tell you a little bit of some tips and tricks on how to increase the intensity in your training, how to continue progression when you're struggling to be able to just go to the next weight limit. Like sometimes you just cannot pick up the next dumbbell, it's too bloody heavy, or the technique looks horrible if you do try and go heavier. So it's like, what do you do if you're stuck at the weight but the reps are there and you're maxing out and you don't know what to do next? This video is going to try to explain why it happens and how to overcome it. So you can keep progressive overloading even if you can't just add more weight. So first of all, why does it happen? Okay, so the scenario, usually it's in lateral raises. Most of you say lateral raises, but basically it's a smaller muscle. It's a more isolated exercise and you're hitting that upper limit of the rep scheme that I recommend, but you're just not able to add weight. And that happens. That is perfectly normal. Like, to be honest, I am forever in between 5 to 6 kilos really on a lateral raise because I have other techniques to make it more challenging beyond just adding more weight. So some exercises you'll be adding more weight really consistently, and in some exercises you're going to implement other strategies, and some exercises you just maintain at, but it keeps pushing the muscles and it just takes longer for it to catch up. So you might not change every single week. It might be monthly. It might be 6 months before you even add any weight, honestly. But I would rather you have better technique before jumping up in a weight if the technique doesn't look as good. So it's usually because of the percentage jump matters more than the number itself. So how I want you to think of it is like if you're doing a 100 kilo leg press and you were to add weight, typically you're going to add 5 or 10 kilos either side, right? Like you do bigger jumps. Why? Because relatively speaking, that is a bigger amount of weight, but the percentages is what we want to factor in. So like if you were just to add 1 kilo on a 100 kilo leg press, you're only adding, relatively speaking, 1% of an increase. But if you add 1 kilo to 5 kilo dumbbell, that's a 20% increase. So it's a very big difference. 1 to 20% is a huge difference. Adding 2.5 kilos on a leg press, on a 100 kilo leg press, is only a 2.5% increase. Adding 2.5 kilos, going from a 5 kilo to a 7.5 kilo dumbbell for lateral raises, is a 50% increase. So you can see why it is so goddamn challenging to go up in weight when you're on your lateral raises in comparison to adding a little bit of weight on your leg press. So smaller weights means that they're bigger relative jumps, especially on those smaller muscles. So what do we do instead? Because we don't sacrifice technique just to go heavier. So we can slow the tempo down. So if you're doing a lateral raise, you can come up, get it as high as you can, hold, and then lower down with as much control as possible. Because I bet you if you're maxing out on the weight, your technique does not look like that. So slow the lowering down phase. The up phase is powerful, pause, and then slowly lower all the way down. You can add more repetitions. You can go beyond what I've recommended. 10 to 12, okay, we'll go 12 to 15. You're just going to have to go more reps until you reach that failure point. The rep schemes are there as a recommendation to help guide how much weight to use, but if you need to go beyond that to continue progressing towards failure, then just do more repetitions. We could potentially add more sets to add more volume, add more fatigue into your muscle. Some other things that I actually didn't put in here that I just thought of as I'm going off the cuff is that we could also do pre-fatiguing techniques. So for example, you could do your shoulder press straight into lateral raises. So you already pre-fatigue your delts a little bit. It's going to make those lateral raises a little bit harder. The same as you could do, you're not really going to max out on leg extension, but if you maxed out on leg extension, or if you didn't want to go heavier in your squats, if you felt like you couldn't push the weight up in your squats right now because it might affect your technique, but you're maxing out on reps, then you could do leg extension first to pre-fatigue your quads and then go into your squats. Things like that can help to make it more challenging on that muscle group if you're not able to increase in the weight. So on bicep curls, for example, we could do a lat pull down and then superset it with bicep curls because a lat pull down is going to pre-fatigue your biceps a little bit. So things like that, we can use a pre-fatiguing set as another strategy. And then another one is using gravity. So for example, if you're doing lateral raises and you're just standing upright, then sit back on an incline bench, and now you've got gravity coming up into the party a little bit earlier down in that bottom position. Maybe you switch to a cable machine and you just have to do more reps maybe on the cable machine. So that's going to also change the line of pull and the effect of gravity. So we can change the way the length of, like the length of the repetition, or how much long, like how stretched the muscle is when there's tension on the muscle. So that's changing the way that we're sitting on the bench. If we're doing lateral raises, you know, if bicep curls, we could go on an incline to get a bit of a stretch at the bottom, or try a preacher curl position so we get more stretch on the muscle. It makes it harder, therefore you cannot go heavier. So we can try other techniques beyond just do lateral raises like normal standing upright. We can make adjustments in order to make it more challenging so that you are able to keep pushing the intensity without having to add any more weight or even repetitions in some cases. So we can change the way that gravity impacts it. We can also do pause and partial reps, so adding pauses at the top and also in the stretched position as long as there's tension. So in a lateral raise, when your arms are down by your side, just relax, you're not going to have tension. But if we can somehow change it so there's gravity involved, then there is tension, or use the cable machine, then there is tension in that stretched bottom position. Then we can pause there and pause at the top. It's going to make more time under tension, and it's going to make the muscle fatigue quicker, so it's going to be harder. And partial reps to the depth. So if you're doing a lateral raise and you can't keep going, then you do little baby reps down the bottom until you absolutely fail. Is another way that you can add intensity without being able to add any more weight. And then if possible, use fractional plates if they have them, like even half a kilo, 100 grams, all of that does count. So there's some different strategies that you can use if you are stuck at a certain weight. So the big picture is think 1% better. Progress doesn't have to be extreme. You don't have to be adding 5 kilos every single week. It can be 1 kilo. It can be 500 grams. It can be 1 repetition. It's small, consistent changes over time that leads to the long-term muscle gains. So just focus on your control, the quality of the movement, and then we can continue to progress the weight and using those other strategies I mentioned before. So aim for 1% stronger, not being perfect, as always. All right, hope that was helpful, fam.